And good morning again. We begin our broadcast with Luci Baines Johnson, the daughter of Lyndon Johnson. She was a 16-year-old student at the National Cathedral School in Washington. She was in Spanish class that day when she got word that there had been trouble in Dallas. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning,
thank you
Bob.
so much
It's
for
my
coming.
honor to be here.
You were in Spanish class.
Yes, we just finished lunch and walked back into our Spanish class and had not settled in for the class yet. And a young girl came running in saying, "The president's been shot, the president's been shot." And of course, the entire class was in a state of deer in headlights and trauma. And our teacher said, girls, we know nothing about the truth of all of these rumors, and until we do, there will be Spanish. You can imagine no one, of course, was listening to those instructions, but the instructions of the heart were overwhelming.
What happened after you got this first word?
Well, shortly afterwards, while there was a twitter in the room, the bells of the National Cathedral began to ring and ring and ring, and 400 girls, without saying a word, rose from their chairs and walked single file down into the gymnasium, which also served as our chapel. Without any instruction, these 400 women, young women, fell to their knees and listened to our headmistress tell us that the president indeed had been shot. His condition was considered very troubling. Governor Conley had been shot. His condition was unknown but considered very troubling. And they asked for all of our prayers. But no one ever said a word about my father or mother. No one said a word, period. And then we were dismissed. And I wandered out into the quadrangle of the school in a daze. I looked over and saw that the Secret Service had very thoughtfully sent a man I knew, one of my father's detail. And I turned and ran in the other direction as if I could run away from the inevitable. And of course, I wasn't capable of outrunning a Secret Service agent.
But you were afraid he was coming with bad news.
Of course I was. And he grabbed me and he said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Luci." And I just beat on his chest and said, "No, Gene, no." And he said, "I'm sorry." And no one even mentioned what "I'm sorry" or "no" was all about, because the words were just unsayable.
Well, when did you finally find out what had happened to your mom and dad and that they were safe?
I asked Gene, I said, "And Daddy and Mother?" And he said, "They're okay."
Did you ever see your mom and dad that night when they finally got back to Washington? I know it was very late.
My mother, yes. My mother came straight home and to comfort me momentarily, but then to be all consumed by the work at hand. And my father went immediately to the executive office building and did not come in till 2 or 3 in the morning. I did see him. We hugged briefly, and then for the days and weeks to come, it was sort of 24/7. There was so much that had to be attended to.
How did he seem? Was he different than you had come to know him?
Strong and steady, determined to do the right thing, measured when all the rest of the world was in a state of great trauma. I think he knew that indeed an evil person had killed our president, but it was his responsibility to show the world that they couldn't kill our country. And so the continuity of serving the American people must go on, and that was, I think, his every moment.
When did you finally move into the White House, and what must that have been like?
Well, one night I heard my mother and father actually have raised voices, and that was just not in their temperament. And my mother was saying, "No, Lyndon, we just can't. We just can't." And my father was saying empathetically but firmly, "Bird, we have to." And she said, "Why, Lyndon?" And he said, "We have to move on December 7th because that's the date that's convenient to Mrs. Kennedy and to the Secret Service, and it is their convenience that we must honor. And my mother said, any day but, and he said, I'm sorry. And I was a post-war baby. I didn't understand that December 7th was a day that would live in infamy forever for their generation. November 22nd had become that day for me.
What was it like to go through the funeral in Washington? What was it like to be there?
Oh, every moment tore your heart out. You looked at the Kennedy family, so close, so young, so vital, so noble, and this beautiful person, Jacqueline Kennedy, standing with a child in each hand, so terribly alone. And she leaned down and she mentioned something into her little boy's ear, and he left her hand and dutifully went over and gave that salute that the world will never forget. And then at that point, I don't think that there was a dry eye anywhere, not only in Washington, but the whole world was watching, and we were just consumed in pain.
As you think back on this 50 years later, what do you think the significance of that day was, and how did it affect you?
Well, it was all so terribly personal. Obviously, the people that it affected most of all were Mrs. Kennedy and her family. And the rest of us were simply a backdrop, feeling their pain and wanting to comfort them and knowing that they couldn't. But for me, it was a moment that changed my world for always. It was a day that will ring with pain and respect for as long as I live.
Luci Baines Johnson, thank you so much.